My next guest is Debra Armstrong. She is an educator, trainer, and coach dedicated to guiding professionals and small business owners on their journeys to achieve professional growth and business success. With years of experience, she has honed the art of personalized coaching, offering tailored solutions that fit her clients' needs, goals, and personalities. Welcome to the podcast, Deborah.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm so happy to kind of have this conversation with you. It's going to be wonderful.
So, we'll start off with a question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Yeah, I was thinking of that and in talking to you about it. I have a couple of them. One of them kind of goes together with this in terms of teaching. So, when I was teaching, I worked for Sonoma County Office of Education. So I worked for the county, not for an individual district. And I was a regional occupational program teacher teaching business. And so the one year with budget cuts and stuff that were going through, what happened was they wanted to keep me full time. So all of a sudden they put me in at a lot of different schools. So literally I was at three different schools and a couple days a week on the same day. So I leave one
Mhm.
school, go to another school, and go to another school. One of those schools was a true regional program, which had two other districts. So I had each of the other schools I was going to were in different districts. And then I had the other three at the one. So I was working with like five districts at the same time trying to keep they had different schedules, different start dates, different a little bit on the vacations were a little bit different, and then working with all the counselors if there were any issues. I just want to say I wanted to pull my hair out. Um,
Mhm.
so kind of dug in there. Then I actually reached out and was talking to, the director of the program and talking about the next year that I would rather be like part-time. So then I started
Mhm.
doing just the what we called the business co-op. So these were students that were out working at different places and working with them. I'd worked as a recruiter before in a in a recruiting firm. So I was working and loved working with them on doing their resumes and kind of navigating that work world. But again, this was back, in the 2000 to 2010, 11, 12, kind of right in that time period. So cuts went along. And so they probably should have cut me the year before and they didn't. But
Mhm.
this time it's like no money left, got cut. And then I'm like, what am I going to do now?
Mhm.
So I went back to school to get my teaching credential and my master's finishing up when I was about 40. So here I'm like mid career, thought I was making a
Mhm.
big kind of career shift and everything shifted again.
Mhm.
And I ended up at a place where I used those skills that I honed to work with adults who wanted to start and grow businesses.
Okay.
So it was a nonprofit, and I started working with them. And I have an entrepreneurial background to working with my husband. So tied all of those different skills in together to start something kind of new and down a new career path
Mhm.
and teaching them and then starting to coach them and then going back, moving, that was all in the Bay Area. And I moved to Idaho. Then I
Mhm.
have to start over again, right? It's like all about starting over again, and looking and starting really going down that career and small business coaching path. Working at
Mhm.
a college for a little bit, helping students that were finishing up a program, and then really going out on my own, and
Mhm.
also working for a firm that does transitions. So people that are laid off from a lot of
Mhm.
different firms, or sometimes it's even their spouse if they're getting moved, working with them and doing that transition. And it's what I love to do. So that's kind of what
Mhm.
I've been doing, working with a lot of different industries. I've worked with teachers before. I've worked with people that want to go into teaching, right? They've
Mhm.
been in a tech field and kind of want to give back. So on all of those areas. So that's
Mhm.
kind of a little bit more than just in the trenches, but kind of where I got from here. And that's how I dug myself out. It was a long process,
Mhm.
but it was one that went kind of organically in some ways too to get
Mhm.
me where I'm
Mhm.
going.
Yeah, so you telling me that a lot of the educators that you work with who are maybe looking at how they can apply their skills to other areas, um, just having your experience doing the business background and also entrepreneurial work, how do you encourage educators maybe who are thinking about starting their own business? There are a lot of educators I know who might still be working full time, but have
Mhm.
started a business, or maybe they are doing edu adjacent careers like
Right.
speaking, but they've started a business. But for those who aren't sure about that business side of things and doing all the paperwork and everything and the marketing, how could they maybe use your services to get started with that?
But one of the things I do is I work with people and kind of figure out kind of what their strengths are and where they're kind of going and help them. The paperwork part actually really scares people a lot of times,
Hmm.
right? Start my business. How am I going to do this? Am I going to screw it up? But I always say it's kind of like, when you buy a house, it's something you go
Hmm.
through one time, right? You
Hmm.
put all that stuff together, you get through it, and then there's a little maintenance stuff you have to do. So that's
Hmm.
something just if you're an educator, you know how to learn, you know how to kind of walk through paperwork and stuff
Hmm.
because you're used to doing it. So you're kind of going through that. The marketing part of it, it depends really on what people want to do. One
Hmm.
of the things I found about a lot of educators a lot of times are can be fairly creative, which is something that's missing for a lot of them now because
Hmm.
they don't get that creativity outlet. But a lot of it is just kind of going through and being persistent,
Hmm.
setting up a plan and following a plan. And a lot of educators have that. There's a lot of skills that people don't think about that
Hmm.
they have as educators that can transfer over. And it's really looking at those transferable skills um, and that part of it. Really, a lot of it is, being somewhat detailed, reaching out to people, and different people are going to be good for different things. Some might want to, if they're wanting to get out of education for some reason, might want to just find a position. But
Hmm.
those that want to start a business, a lot of them might want to do some sort of consulting. They might have
Hmm.
something they've always loved doing. Um, like baking and they want to kind of, start selling something at the farmer's market, start out small. Some of them might want to do, if they've done leadership kind of stuff in
Hmm.
education, might want to set themselves up as a kind of a leadership coach for those that are in education. So kind of a lot of
Hmm.
different paths that they can go down.
Hmm. Hmm. So I've previously talked to Mike Byer,
Yeah,
um,
here it
and
is.
we
It was
talked,
great.
yes, we talked a little bit about his experience after being a school leader and being forced to leave, and then using his skills and doing
Mhm.
leadership coaching and working with educators and helping them find other career paths. So your experience is a little different. You did a lot of work with the CTE, the
Right.
tech credentials and business when you taught. So um, when you're working with adults who have some teaching experience, maybe who aren't sure really what field to go into. What are some examples of fields that they might start off with if they've been a teacher and haven't had any leadership experience, for example?
One of the great things is there's difference between teaching children and teaching adults.
Hmm.
But on the same hand, it's not a huge difference, right? It's
Hmm.
like you need to look and see what kind of motivates adults,
Hmm.
but you have that skill of kind of basically transferring knowledge from one person to another. So looking at that and using that skill. So one of the areas a lot of people can look at is training and development.
Hmm.
And so if they're looking at that, it's one thing I'm looking at where you're using those same skills. The
Hmm.
other thing is it might be able to use your skills because teachers are really good planners. They're good at organizing. They're good at kind of facilitating conversations and stuff. So there's different industries you can look at for that too. So one
Hmm.
of the things I have people do, and you and I talked about this a little bit, is doing what I call informational interviews. And what that is say you're interested in a field. Maybe you've always loved to bake and you're like, okay, I have my grandma's cookies. I think I want to go sell them at the farmer's market and see if I can kind of build maybe some sort of catering business or baking business. It's starting to talk to people that are in those fields that you're looking at.
Hmm.
So finding somebody, going to your local farmer's market, finding someone that's doing baking and saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. I would love to talk to you about your experience. People are usually really good about talking about their experiences and what they went through.
Hmm.
The other thing is talking to people adjust socially too.
Hmm.
So, a lot of teachers know other teachers, but a lot of them have their spouses that are in different industries or people you meet somewhere else and just start talking to them about what they're doing. I've known
Hmm.
people that have gone from educate from teaching into banking. A
Hmm.
little bit different, but it's building those relationships and some of those skills are transferable. It's talking to people, finding out kind of what they're doing and thinking about where they want to kind of go forward on that. So it's kind of like, okay, what do I need to do? gaps, right? Going
Mhm.
back to, again, if you think of education, you have kids that are here, they need to get here. What do you need to do to fill that gap?
Mhm.
Same thing here. You're here, you want to be here. What do you need to do to fill that gap? Sometimes
Mhm.
it's additional education. Sometimes it's just like learning on the job. Sometimes if you have, I know a lot of educators do a lot of work and stuff in the summer, but if you have that little bit of a break in time there, is going in and job shadowing somebody for a little while to see what they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, so it would be a way to kind of go in and kind of test the waters a little bit to see what you like about it on
Mhm.
that part
Mhm.
too.
Mhm. And you told me in the pre-chat also, as a teacher, you have a lot of parents that you might know through
Yes.
conferences or just have contact with
Mhm.
them. So
Yep.
maybe while you're still in a teaching role, really find out more about those industries as
Right.
well from some parents.
Oh yeah, especially if you know a parent that's in a role, and you might not want to say I'm thinking of leaving, or you might say I am. I'm thinking of
Mhm.
leaving kind of teaching. Would love to find out a little bit more about kind of what you do, especially if it's something that you've done before. And I think Mike did this too when one of the things he went into is real estate. I know teachers that have gone into real estate. So start talking to people about it. Like what are they doing in real estate? How does it work? Job shadowing on that, somebody that's in banking, somebody that is maybe in some sort of customer facing role that they might be interested in.
Mhm.
And anybody that does learning and development, when you're making a career transition really from one kind of career to another,
Mhm.
one of the most important things to think about is really the fact that just sending out a bunch of resumes a lot of times is not going to work.
Mhm.
You need to tailor your resume differently than it's a very different. It's different than an educator's resume, and but still, even then, a lot of it's going to be on individual conversations
Mhm.
where you can show someone how your skill set is going to fit what they're doing. And sometimes you're going to find that out during the conversation. So they'll talk about
Mhm.
needing somebody that's organized and can talk in front of a group of people, and they're like, I do that every
Mhm.
day, right? I'm
Mhm.
organized.
Mhm.
Somebody that is some in other skill sets that somebody might have. If it's a someone that's a really good writer, and
Mhm.
some teachers are better writers than others. English teachers are great at kind of writing skills. So it might be we need someone that can come in and do some writing and do some content. So that might be one of the things that they look at. So
Mhm.
based on like and obviously elementary is going to be a little bit different than high school because of the training and stuff they have. So kind of looking at what your strengths are at, start kind of writing those down. Like what are
Mhm.
transferable skills? I have the ability to manage a classroom, which means I have ability to manage probably a staff also in some
Mhm.
ways, right? Kind of seeing what's working on that. I have the ability to create curriculum and
Mhm.
to kind of help it flow. I have the ability to interface or talk to, parents, which also means I can talk to other key stakeholders, right? I'm
Yeah.
used to working with key stakeholders, and that's in a lot of businesses, that's one of the big things that people are doing.
Mhm.
So it's taking that time, stopping and looking at what you do on a daily basis and looking at kind of what does that translate into. Um,
Mhm.
but usually when you're making that transition, it's going to be the conversations, not just, I talked to one guy that was an educator and he was not having a good time trying to
Mhm.
find something new. And I went through and reviewed his resume with him. And he had all this, and he was trying to get into, more of adult education, adult learning and development, right? But up on the
Mhm.
top, he still had things about coaching and working classroom management, but he had
Mhm.
it more as I'm trying to think of how he had things worded as teaching. He didn't talk in a corporate manner. He talked in
Mhm.
a classroom manner, right? So you kind of changing those things out. It is developing curriculum. It is
Mhm.
knowledge transfer, but
Mhm.
he had it really based and set up like he had things on there that he also coached the soccer team or something on there too, where somebody in learning development, they don't care about that part, they don't care the
Mhm.
extracurricular part you're doing. um,
Mhm.
so one of the things when you're looking is matching the wording that they have in a job description.
Mhm.
Right. So if they're talking in the job description about somebody that comes in as a trainer, you're not going to talk about your word teacher. You're going to talk, I was worked training children. You're going to
Mhm.
use the same language that they had. If you're doing training and development, I talked to him. He did some professional development for his school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like talk about the professional development you had where you're working with teachers, kind of doing really a knowledge exchange with them in terms of their skill set.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really looking at those and figuring out where that's going to stand, where it's going to stand. And like I said, if you're doing training and development, it's looking, some of those things are going to be exactly the same,
Mm-hmm.
but you'd want to use the words they're using, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the words that you normally would use,
Mm-hmm.
using key stakeholders instead of parents,
Yeah.
which is, it's kind of the same thing. And they're usually pretty strong in their stakeholding there when you're working with
Mm-hmm.
parents.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking there are some educators who, if you're trying to write a resume for a different type of job outside of
Mhm.
education, they might want to start with AI
Yes.
to try to pull out some of their skills. Is
Mhm.
that very helpful?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you suggest they maybe find a career coach?
It depends. Yeah, I'm a career coach, so I'm going to say yes, find a career coach. But AI is great enough for a lot of parts of it too. So a
Hmm.
couple of things you can do is with AI is you can put in. I use Chat GPT a lot, and I
Hmm.
use it a lot with my clients too. Some of it is you can put in the skills and stuff you did and ask it what are adjacent kind of industries or
Hmm.
jobs that you can do. So they might be adjacent, they might be completely different, but listing your skill set, which might also,
Hmm.
your degree. So some people have a, degree in early education. Some people have a degree in chemistry or
Hmm.
something else. So kind of what kind of degree, what have you done? What are those skill sets? And let AI help you figure out maybe what to explore. Um, and one of the things when you're looking at this, I talk about it's like looking at it as an experiment or exploring. You're trying to see what's out there and what's going to work for you or not. Right. So
Hmm.
when you kind of go in with that mindset of, okay, I'm going to put something in AI and it says, you know what, I might really like, you know, working in my a background in a pharmaceutical company,
Hmm.
saying somebody that's like in, has a degree in biology, is in starting talking to people and have that exploratory mind that says, okay, when I'm going to go talk to them, I'm not going to shut things down. I'm going to ask open-ended questions. I'm going to try to pull as much information as I can. But you're getting some of that from AI. Also,
Hmm.
AI can help you saying if you have like write out a kind of a bullet that you would use in your resume that is
Hmm.
really more education or school based, K-12 based, you might write it out and
Hmm.
say, okay, how would I put this where I'm applying for a job that is in a corporate job in training? How can I
Hmm.
rewrite this?
Hmm.
Uh, there are a lot of key things on that. Working with a career coach can be great because there's a lot of tricks and stuff that
Hmm.
tricks isn't the right word, but there's a lot of things you need to do, especially if you're going to just be applying or you want to have somebody help you navigate that. Um, for There's a thing called ATS that if you're just sitting out there and applying, which is applicant tracking systems,
Okay.
and that's been around for, I remember talking to somebody, I'm going to date myself here, back in the 90s that worked for a large company, and they talked about scanning resumes and looking for keywords. That was back then. Now
Hmm.
it's gotten much more sophisticated, but a lot of companies, they go through, and actually it's not as sophisticated as it should be. They go through and they look for exact matches on those the resume to what the job description is. And that's why I'm saying if
Hmm.
someone's talking about teaching and they're talking about training, pretty much kind of the same
Hmm.
thing, right? But they're going to look at it and then like, oh, they don't have any experience training because they have teacher in there, they don't have training.
Hmm.
Right. So it's matching those words up. So there's some nuances that if you work with a career coach, actually it's going to make it easier for you and faster for you to find something than trying to figure it out on your own. Like
Hmm.
the one gentleman that was there that I was talking to and working with, he'd been applying for like 4 months. And I'm like, no wonder you're not getting anything. I just looked at his resume and it's just like, no
Hmm.
wonder you're not hearing anything back. Right? Change this, change this, change this, go
Hmm.
through on here. And he had the skill set. He just wasn't explaining it in the way that you want.
Hmm.
Um, if you think about it as an educator, you talk to students in a language that they kind of know and understand. You don't kind of go up here when they're down here. You kind of build them up to that, right? So if you're
Hmm.
going in and you're applying for a role and their language is here and yours is here, they're not going to see the same thing. So you want to kind
Mhm.
of bridge that gap so that they can
Mhm.
see what you're talking about, that it matches to what they're looking for.
Mhm. Mhm. And how about things like practicing your interview, especially for teachers who've only been to educator type interviews, and
Oh yeah.
they might do a lot of more behavioral type questions in another fields type interview,
Right.
or what kind of personality traits you have, those type of things that you would never get necessarily in an educator interview.
Right.
And then the value of LinkedIn, I know as well. Many educators are on LinkedIn, but they don't use it to find jobs.
Yeah. Oh yeah, LinkedIn. So two different things there, both of them really significant.
Hmm.
So I just remember, when I was interviewing for teaching roles, it was very
Hmm.
different. And the
Yeah.
one where I ended up, it was like one interview with a panel interview there and very specific questions, went through fast. I actually knew a couple of the people because I networked so that they knew who I
Hmm.
was, which really helped. Then, um, but they're different. So when you're interviewing in the corporate world, I have people that go through 10 interviews,
Hmm.
right? Before seven. That's really extreme. But normally you're going to do 4 or 5 interviews.
Hmm.
They are going to ask you behavioral questions,
Hmm.
right? They're going to ask you about a time. Some of the question right now that's really popular, which I hate, but it's like, tell me about a time that you failed.
Hmm.
And so if you're not used to those kind of questions and you go in and you're just then all of a sudden you're going to be there staring blankly at like, when did I fail? Or you're going to give one that was a really bad failure that you
Hmm.
probably don't want to share in an interview.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right, there's ways that we can kind of look at what we're saying and making it not necessarily positive, but what you learn from it doing that. So very different kind of the interview things. When I was doing my teacher training, I know a couple times I had to do a little like mock lesson. If you're
Hmm.
doing training and education, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to probably ask you to do, come in and do a mock kind of training session. They're going to give you stuff to do. That would be kind of the same. But again, you're talking to adults, so you have to figure out how you're going to do that in there too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but practicing is great. You can Google and see what the most important, or AI again, go on AI and just say, this is the kind of role I'm going for. You can put in the type of, like if you have a job description that you know that you're going to be interviewing for, put the job description in there. By the way, save your job descriptions. If you apply to something,
Hmm.
somewhere, don't just save the link because those links a lot of times go away once they're not actively recruiting people anymore, and then people are there, they have no idea what the job is because they
Hmm.
don't keep a copy of the job description.
Hmm.
You could put that job description in there, the company, and ask AI, chat, can you tell me some of the interview questions that might come up from this? So
Hmm.
that'll give you a basis place to start. um, then switching over to kind of like LinkedIn,
Hmm.
if we're looking at LinkedIn, LinkedIn is probably one of the most valuable tools you can have especially if you're exploring and looking at making a change,
Hmm.
right? So educators, like you said, when I've worked with people that are trying to get into education, I don't emphasize necessarily LinkedIn with them because for a lot of
Hmm.
them, especially if they're trying to become a teacher, no one's going on there looking for them, looking for that skills. That's not how that works.
Hmm.
Other in the business industry, basically 95% of companies use LinkedIn in some way or another for
Hmm.
recruiting. And a lot of them have a dedicated, a lot of large companies, when they have people that they call sourcers, those people that are sourcing candidates, they're on LinkedIn all the time looking for
Hmm.
candidates, looking for that. So looking for a job, that part of it is very valuable, but you have to be where they can see you, which is
Hmm.
part of it, is having the right skills in there, the right information. So changing that up on there.
Hmm.
But more important than that, which is important, is the fact that you can start building and finding people that maybe have gone through the same trajectory that you're trying to go through. They've already gone
Hmm.
through it.
Hmm.
Or again, when I talk about doing informational interviews, you might be able to go through and find someone that's in maybe your town that's done something similar and reaching out to them. So it's a really good way to start kind of that networking with people to make those contacts that can help
Hmm.
you. Like I said, it's those conversations when you're really changing industries, it's going to make a difference.
Hmm. Hmm.
So But there's parts of LinkedIn, and this is again where you talk about a career coach. They're going to help you kind of
Mhm.
do all of this, right? So you're going to have your LinkedIn where somebody looks at it and they know that, okay, this person's not an axe murderer, right? They know
Mhm.
that they
Mhm.
have a professional background. They have an idea of who they are. They maybe see some recommendations. So they know that they're talking to somebody that's kind of a legitimate person. Now you can get your little check mark too that shows that you're that who you say you are
Mhm.
on LinkedIn. But that gives you that start to start a conversation with somebody, seeing if you can do a phone call, if it's somebody local, a cup of coffee, and start having those conversations. So
Mhm.
it's twofold. It's building it's building um that trust, that network that's going to help you navigate and get into a role. It's also building up what you're doing so a recruiter can find you and also have that conversation. So
Mhm.
LinkedIn in the business world is invaluable.
Mhm.
But again, I've worked with somebody, her husband was getting transferred. So she was in Illinois and they were moving to Texas, but she was a
Mhm.
teacher and educator. And I started working with her and, trying to find a teaching role, which she did actually fairly easily, but it was kind of navigating that. It's like, no, you don't really need to do LinkedIn. Why don't we find who she did? English as a second language. So we found the person that was in charge of that in Texas, had her the school district she wanted in, sent an email, was able to meet with her.
Mhm.
So for somebody that's doing education to education, it's not necessarily as important. Probably more administratively, it gets more important. But if you're trying to transition out, it's extremely important to have that
Mhm.
LinkedIn
Mhm.
um, up and going the way it should be.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of people can, find things on LinkedIn where they might want to share articles and those types of things as
Yep.
educators, but in the business world, it might not be so much what you're sharing on LinkedIn. It might be more just kind of what your profile looks like. Is that correct? Or do people also look at what you share?
They're going to look at what you share also, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to, there's a couple things that you can do. So one
Mm-hmm.
thing, sharing is important, right? Posting, doing stuff, being out there, being visible.
Mm-hmm.
So you're raising your visibility when you post. So finding
Mm-hmm.
articles, posting in those areas, extremely important. And even a little more important than that is commenting on other people's posts,
Mm-hmm.
right? So going through commenting on other people's posts. So somebody posts an article on there, and instead of just liking it and kind of moving on, going in and writing a little thing like, oh, yes, that was a really interesting post. I liked this, this, and this about it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing. And what that does is it brings up your visibility. So LinkedIn it's kind of a whole different thing. It's when you're there, you have your first, seconds, and thirds. First are the people that you're connected to. So you and I are now a first connection,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the people that you're connected to or I'm connected to now become second connections,
Mm-hmm.
and the people that they're connected to becomes third connections. So when you post something, sometimes what'll happen is, say, somebody will see that is a second or third of yours that you're not connected to at all, will see
Mm-hmm.
that post
Mm-hmm.
and react to that post.
Mm-hmm.
So posting is important. You don't and posting is important, commenting is important. If you just go and throw up a bunch of posts and don't do anything with them or don't interact with other people, it's not going to do you really any good, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
wanting to really start a conversation with people on this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, really that conversational piece and that
Mhm.
two-way.
Yeah. And
Um,
I know as some educators use LinkedIn, like you said, some of them, but I find that classroom teachers don't as much. So
yeah.
those that seem to are those that are much more and a lot of classroom educators I know don't even have a LinkedIn, wouldn't even know how to get on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
People I know, but also other people. Other ones, if you're more in an administrative or you're trying to kind of be more in a leadership role, that's where a lot of those people are on LinkedIn, which
Mm-hmm.
is why it's good as a classroom. If you want to kind of raise your awareness, it's not a bad thing to be on LinkedIn. It'd probably be very good for people. They just don't necessarily take advantage of it the same way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, you're process of developing a program
Yes, I'm
that
excited.
will be up and ready when this episode
Yes.
releases. And so you're going to be able to do it's in addition to what you're already doing now, which is career coaching and resume help and interview prep, but you're also going to be able to do group sessions. And is this something that people can access via online content? Is it going to be like asynchronous? Some of this program talk about what it looks like.
Asynchronous. What I'm in the process of doing is basically kind of developing a class where you can kind of
Okay.
log in, go through the information and do that. So much of the information, and there's so much of it out there. Some of it's
Hmm.
my hard part right now is whittling down some of it so it's not like a fire hose at people, right?
Hmm.
But kind of getting that information out there and then doing basically group coaching with those people because
Hmm.
you learn, as we all know, like when you learn in a classroom setting, you learn as much uh, and especially in adult education from the people
Hmm.
that are around you as much as you do from like the curriculum that's coming in that interaction.
Hmm.
So what it's going to be is basically, and I'm trying to think of how many modules are in it. I think there's 7 or 8, but it's covering all the basics of interviewing and career transition. So resumes, cover letters, talking about interviewing skills, networking,
Hmm.
LinkedIn, salary negotiations, all of that in there. So people can kind of go through at their own pace and they can join whenever they want. Because when somebody
Hmm.
wants a new job, they don't want to wait to have something where I'm in a class with a bunch of other people necessarily of doing that. So that's going to kind of go through. I'm working on that right now. And then what'll be there is also then group sessions. So people can come in and I haven't decided once or twice a week, probably twice a week that I'll have a time period where people can come in, ask questions. If somebody wants to do some interview practice coaching, doing that because other people learn
Hmm.
whenever they hear somebody else answering questions. So kind of doing some of that as a group where you
Hmm.
learn from the people that are there, from the questions they're asking, or maybe the interactions, plus from me and using my expertise
Hmm.
to help them hone those skills
Okay.
when they're out there looking. But that way, it just allows everyone to kind of come in. And I love what I do. I'm one of those. It's like if it went on for, I'll probably be scheduled for like 90 minutes. If it went on for 2 hours because I'm working with people,
Hmm.
it would go on for 2 hours because
Hmm.
I love what I do and I love helping people succeed in kind of, I always say, move forward professionally, right? So,
Hmm.
whatever that profession is, whatever I can do to help them move forward. So, if it is
Hmm.
starting their own business, they want to start coaching or they want to start, a cookie business, which I always bring that up because I worked with my husband. He did consumer packaged goods around food stuff. So, we worked together a lot on that too. Um, but if they want to do that or they want to just move forward in their career, they want to find their next career, they want to find their next role. They want
Hmm.
to, figure out, okay, I'm in a position now, but I want to start moving up. What do I need to do? So I
Hmm.
love doing that. That's kind of like, that puts a smile on my face
Hmm.
whenever I do that. And when I see people succeed, I do my little happy dance.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so that's going to be available for and it should be, I'm planning a rollout in January.
Hmm.
So if this airs, probably February, somewhere in there, it should be up and running. They'll be able to find it on my website, which is Next Level Careers with two X's. So
Hmm.
NEXXT level, LEVEL careers.com. I'm also on LinkedIn
Hmm.
and fairly active on LinkedIn. So you can usually connect with me there or email me at Debra at Next Level Careers. So
Okay.
easy to find me, I think.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my LinkedIn is my name is Debra, I think dash Armstrong
Hmm.
is my LinkedIn.
Great. I'll include those in the show notes as well. Well, we've had a great conversation around kind of your roles in education and what happened when there were budget cuts and how you now help educators who are either thinking of transitioning within an educator role, coming into education, or exiting education. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
And I think it kind of brought this up, but I necessarily didn't, is you want to connect the dots for wherever you want to go, which means
Hmm.
you need to point out, you need to look at what you've done and how it will help the other role, which is what I kind of said before, is speaking their language, doing that. You can't just kind of take one thing and say, here's what I've done and see what you can, what do you want me to do? It's more
Hmm.
like you need to see what they want, what they're looking for, and
Hmm.
bringing up your skills and pointing out how you're going to help them. So it's really connecting the dots for them, speaking their language if you're looking to make that change.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, really important to remember. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. Thanks for your tips for educators, and they can also visit your site, nextlevelcareers.com, to find out more.
Yep, thank you. It's been great. Thank you so much for having me on, Dana. I've loved every minute of it.